There's a lot of heart in this story, and that's where the potential lies. Now, potential energy isn't wasted energy, and that's the great thing about potential. It always has the chance to make itself known later in the future. But potential energy is killed, and it's put to rest abruptly whenever we rush things, and whenever we just let the excitement consume us. And I can say that being a person that was in that position once long ago. I recognize the signs. I know exactly what it's like to be there. So I have no problems or qualms with saying that this book isn't ready to be published, especially in May 2019. The reason why is because there's so much that this book wants to accomplish. I can feel the life in the book as it wants to reach out and yearn for people to care about it. But it can't get there with the amount of time that it needs. I'm going to touch on just those points today, on how this book can arrive at its potential and what it can do to see that it brings the justice that the author wants to bring to people. Because as of now, the book, in my eyes, is in its draft form. It has a lot of potential, but it needs a lot more work before people can find that they identify with it, because right now, the words and the story itself is lost in chaos. For the beginning part of the book, I found myself asking, I remember from page 1 to 15 actually, I remember thinking and wondering where exactly I was, because I didn't have a sense of just that. I knew I was in school, with the character or watching the character, but I didn't understand the problem, because the problem at the point seemed to be so minuscule. It was so focused on her looks and that people liked the way she looked, that it didn't really speak out to me. And no, it's not because I'm not a girl or anything like that. It's really just because it sounds like, it was kind of like a person on the street saying, "Oh my god, I have $100. I have $100. What the hell am I going to do with the $100? And it lessened the strength of whatever that message was trying to bring to me, because it was said over and over again. Now, I think there was more potential to establish just what the problem was, because when it comes to developing characters of any sort, a good character is one that has a problem and knows how to move on from it. And really, physical aesthetics, the only thing you can do about saying that someone's pretty, let's put it like this. Let's say the character was very attractive but thought that she wasn't attractive, and had to spend these years in high school trying to find herself just as beautiful as she thought she was, or as beautiful, or I'm sorry, not as beautiful as she was, as beautiful as her mother was saying, and as beautiful as her friend later on, Cassie, says. That would make for a good story, because it could be a story about finding yourself, or finding love within yourself to love yourself. But that wasn't there. In the first couple pages, it just established that she's pretty, and that everyone thinks so, and it kind of demonized all the guys in the story. And I think that if this book is going to be published, I think it's important to not alienate the viewers, the readers, or whatever you want to address everything as. I don't think it's a good idea to alienate the guys away from this story, because when I was reading it, I was sitting there, first of all, the main character was complaining about the guys, hugging her and pressing their thing, in that exact quote, against her leg. And now, I get it, we guys can be pigs sometimes. Girls can be the same exact way, though. No one's perfect. But we don't do that. I don't know any guy that's done that. And, I mean, I watched a show called Big Mouth recently, and one of the characters who looks like Chucky Finster, what's his name? Andrew Gluberman's his name. He's a character from a show called Big Mouth, and it's a not a paradoxical. It's a parody-based show that just makes fun of the adolescence of teens, but it does a really well job of doing this by taking the things that teens actually go through, and it just makes fun of it. And in this one episode, this guy, he likes this girl, he's in 7th grade, and he hugs her, and then all of a sudden, he makes this face, and she's like, "What just happened?" And it turns out, yes, viewer discretion is advised, he ejaculates himself. Now, that was specifically so it could be in a comedic sense, but the way this main character presented it seemed like it was such a personal bothering to her that it was really offsetting to read, because I was just like, dude, guys don't do this. And even as a guy, I'm kind of like, I'm thinking maybe this book isn't for guys. Maybe it's for girls who have gone through this specific kind of thing. But even then, it goes back to my specific point. It just alienates your viewers, or I'm sorry, your readers. I'm thinking of YouTube. It alienates your readers. And as an author, you don't really want to do that. Now, it's not like that kind of thing where people will say, oh, I only like science fiction, or oh, I don't like romance, so they won't go into that genre. In this case, you don't want to, you want to sell it to every demographic to the best of your ability. You don't want to say anything to really, cause a juxtaposition between males and females and the whole gender debate in your book while you're reading it, because then you're only going to get girls or any other person who agrees with that kind of thing, and not the guys. Because as a guy, I was reading it and I'm like, okay, I guess that's what we do when we hug girls. And, sometimes there are guys out there who genuinely want to hug girls as friends, and even then, if they have sexual intent, they don't do that. Like, that felt really unrealistic, and it was very offsetting to me. Now, it's not to say that if you want to get your character to dislike the way guys look at her, the objectifying, yes, I can see that, being seen as eye candy. It can feel and seem very disrespectful, but it also seemed very hypocritical when the character then later was taking those same compliments from Cassie, a girl, sure, who she was attracted to, but it just didn't really make sense. Why is it that guys in this way should be seen as, or why should guys be demonized in this negative light, while just one girl basically says, oh, you're beautiful, you're this, you're that, you should see yourself as this. Because in my eyes, all she did was say things in a different way. It's not like she really said anything that different. The guys that were in this book, they said things in a pervasive manner. Yeah, they were kind of tools. Some of them were like, oh yeah, you're really cute. Yeah, you like that, don't you? You like hearing that? And then, yeah, I could see how the main characters turned off from that, but it seemed like all the guys were like that, and except there was one character, what's his name? Crispin, that's what it was. Crispin, he seemed like a pretty genuine kid, and he was probably one of my favorite characters, to be honest, because he seemed the most realistic, and his dialogue showed just that. Now, you can argue, why does it matter if I show not tell, and can't it go both ways? Should there be some times where I tell and not show? And the answer is yes. In the moments where things are monotonous, like for example, when the teachers were giving the students lessons about, certain writing prompts and things such as that, those are things you can tell, and sometimes those are things you don't even need to tell. Why? Because it's not meaningful to the plot. The plot doesn't gain anything from that. I get it. Yeah, it does show just where they are in terms of their years of experience, but we all remember what it was like to be in 6th and 7th grade and those years beyond. We don't really need a reminder of those things, because it will just make the reader say, okay, well, what about the plot? So those are things you can actually just say simply as, oh, the teacher gave us a lesson on this, blah, 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 or you could even reference it in dialogue. For example, what if Crispin and the main character are talking, and then all of a sudden he says, did you do that homework assignment for so-and-so teacher? Yeah, I can't believe we only have about, I can't believe we can only use 10 words. Yeah, that's ridiculous, right? And then you can segue into whatever conversation you want, because it references something that happened, and then you can build off of that. In this case, the world building would take place in your school, and that's just what you can build. You can bring the nostalgia of school in general, and that's what this story can feed off of. We'll remember that while learning about this character's story. There are also a lot of moments where the characters were walking in hallways. Now, this is something I've actually picked up on in anime and a lot of TV shows. Sometimes a character will have banter. In fact, you can even find this in Kingdom Hearts 3. Sometimes the character, let's say a protagonist is having like banter with an antagonist. Let's say the protagonist says, "Oh, your mom looks like poop," and then the antagonist is like, "Oh yeah, well your mom is poop." And the main character, the protagonist, would sit there and be like, "Is that all you got? Is that the best comeback you have?" Like, I noticed in moments like those, that's the writer's work calling themselves out. And I saw that in this writing, because sometimes I feel like our subconscious comes out a lot when we write. And when characters have dialogue like that, like when your character is literally saying that your line could be better, I feel like your character is consciously trying to tell you, hey buddy, you gotta come up with something different here. And I felt that in the many cutscenes that took place with these characters walking in the hallway. Now, I understand maybe you were going for awkward silences, or, you were trying to show that sometimes as kids, we go through like, social anxiety, and we're trying to find ways to kill the dead air, in the room or the hallway. But there are a lot of moments, needless moments, I'll say, where the characters would have conversations, and then all of a sudden the narration would say, and the two walked off without anything else to say, but it would continue talking about how they had nothing to say. And I feel like that just told me that you as the writer didn't actually have anything to say there. And I don't know if that was actually happening. I don't know if that was actually helping the plot at all. I felt like if there was nothing to say there, then there is nothing to say. We can move on from that. Scene break. Let's move somewhere else. Let's focus on what else is important. The whole show not tell and tell not show, it can go both ways, and there are a lot of ways to make sure that it's being used effectively. All you just have to do is ask yourself when it's most appropriate. Do you, like, for example, when you woke up today, right, and you had breakfast? I don't need to know what you had for breakfast, but I know that you're here, you're listening to this. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know what you had. I don't need to know what time you ate, unless if it's contingent to this review, or unless if it's contingent to, your college courses. It has nothing to do with anything. When you go to take a test in your college campus, it only has to do with what you've learned. And a novel is really just an enlarged test when you really think about it. It's everything that has to do with the story. And when it comes to show not tell, all you have to show is what is most important. All you have to tell is just the little filler stuff that may be important, but not as important as the main events. Now, getting rid of all the chunky dialogue that has to do with that said stuff would help the story flow a lot better, because in the beginning I felt myself asking, where am I? What is going on? What's the problem? And the problem is, it's kind of sadistic to say of all of us humans, but that's what draws us in the first place. No one wants to learn about a perfect character. Because then we're not sensing any form of growth. Like, what if we went into college with an education? Then it's like, why go to college? It's all about character growth in here. That's where the potential lies in this book. Maybe it's not just meant to be one book that focuses on 4 grade levels. Maybe it can focus on grade 6 or grade 6 and 7, and then it can go from there. But because there were so many ideas put into one book, it kind of caused everything to feel like it was rushing, even though I think there were 330 pages for an ebook, and that's a pretty decent amount. That's actually a little above the average size of a novel, but this book could have actually expanded on the more nitty-gritty details. It could have shrunken on the nitty-gritty details, and it could have focused more on the problem. And the key to that really is just finding the problem a lot quicker than, we actually find it. And being pretty isn't a problem, even if it is being objectified. Now, you can prove me wrong and make it so that it's a problem, but you have to do that by showing it. I don't want to be told that. That's just me personally. Every reader, every person has their preference, but I just didn't find myself caring about the fact that she was pretty. In fact, I was like, good for you, You already seem smart, based on what I was told, and I don't really feel bad that you're pretty. I don't even feel bad that people look at you that way, because let's face it, we all want to look that way. We all want to be seen attractive. That's why some people put on makeup. It's why we dress a certain way. Now, yes, it's for ourselves, but at the same time, we don't walk outside naked, aside from it being, not decent for public exposure. We want to look good. We want to feel good. And that's why it wasn't so much of a problem for me. So I don't know if it'd be a problem to the character. Here's a potential recipe for character growth, though. Another one, I think. The main character focuses on wanting to be seen as an intellectual who is very intelligent and smart, but it seems that her looks separate her from everyone else. So why don't we have it that the characters in the story, or the guys, or whoever you want to put in there, are the ones who hound after her, and then she says, oh my god, I don't want to deal with anybody because that's not what I'm interested in now. Now, we have to come back to the fact that these guys are in 6th grade. Now, I know I mentioned the TV show Big Mouth and how it basically parodies the events that happen in, to teenagers when they're in 7th grade and beyond. But that show is in its own respective category. The reason why is it's rated mature, and it's supposed to appeal to the millennials who are like, what? I'm turning 25 soon, so it's supposed to appeal to like the 22 to 25-year-olds now who were kids way back in 2006 and so forth. These kids, this book doesn't seem to be as graphic as Big Mouth. It's not supposed to be as... I can tell it's a lot more serious in that way because there's death. There's a lot of things that are involved. But I just don't know if it's appropriate to talk about the things that they do. I mean, yeah, kids can be a lot more sexually charged nowadays because they have phones, they have the internet, they can look up anything that they want. But it really hits the reader wrong when they go back to that time. Like, let's say you had a child who was in 6th grade. Let's say they were talking about these things. Would you still want to know that they are? Like, it's really weird, to me at least. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that this was what my daughter or son was doing, and to know that these guys are acting like this. I know what the guys were like, and I know what the girls are like at my age, but to put that in a book it's different. I think it's more appropriate to show it as them being innocent and then them growing into those, I guess, sexual activities later on. It makes sense for it to be that way because like guys look at girls like they have cooties most of the time anyway. And we don't really sit there and say, oh yeah, she's really freaking hot in 6th or 7th grade, unless if we've been influenced to think that. Now, if that's what you want to do, that's a whole different kind of story. And then, of course, this has to do with the show not tell thing again, but it has to do with the death of the main character's mother. And I feel like this scene had a lot more potential to be impactful, but again, this was told to us. And it was told to us in such short form. Like, it's your mother, you know? It's like you don't let your parent die off screen and then don't give them the respect that they already got in the beginning, you know? And even if they weren't given respect in the beginning, it still would have been nice to just delve into that a little more. It's really weird to say, but show how she died. Show the feelings that are happening with the character. Don't tell us. Unless if this book was coming from like a journalistic perspective where she writes everything down and then tells it to us as the readers, that's different. But you don't want to tell this kind of thing because it just separates emotions from all the logical things that are happening in the story, and that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want the reader to think, oh, okay, you don't want the reader to get separated from your fantasy. You want them to think as if it were happening to them. And this funeral, everything that had to do with it, I just felt nothing. Now, what could have happened with the funeral is that we could have went there and family and friends could have shown up and they could have told us about the past of the mother. We could have learned a little bit about her there. And those things that the family and friends could have talked about are things that you could have shown in the beginning of this book so that it tied a lot more beautifully with her death. But I don't want to ramble for too much longer. I mean, my main points were just really about what could have happened to help this book come out a lot better, because I think the ideas were great and the potential is great and it's wonderful, but there was a lot of crammed information in here. And I think it's not only the rush to publish the book, but it's also the rush to tell these things that causes it all to be told rather than shown. And that hurts the book. I think all books, all stories, all things deserve the attention to detail. They're books. Like, when you go to a movie and when you see something that's only 114 minutes, they have the right to show you that stuff. Or I'm sorry, they have the right to show you those things visually. They have the right to tell you those things in monologue because they don't have that much time to display their story. But when it comes to reading, I mean, people read books specifically so they can get lost, specifically so they can get into the details and the important ones contingent to the story. But when it's told to you, it's kind of like saying you might as well have just given me the movie. I think the only character that I actually liked was Crispin, and it was probably because he was just a genuine kid and he might have been the only guy that wasn't demonized in this entire story, aside from the dad and everything. But other than that, I felt like the characters didn't really have a sense of self. Their dialogue, even though it was there and it was personal to them, I just didn't feel connected to the story, and I didn't feel connected to them. And because of that, I didn't have a care in the world, and that's not good as a reader. I want to feel. That's the whole reason why I'm doing this. So, I don't really have a rating for this book, because it's not done yet, and I know what it can become when it is, and I can't wait for that day. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was Justin J with another review from Books of All Shades, and it was on the book The Stars Within Us, written by 𝗵𝗍 𝐻𝐿. Now, this book isn't finished, so you won't be able to find it on Goodreads or Amazon or anything like that just yet, but you should be happy to know that he'll be putting a lot of work into developing this story, as it is still not finished, and I cannot wait to see what it becomes later on. If you enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up button below, and make sure that you subscribe and like for future content. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear more things that involve world building, you can find original content from my channel known as The Other Side, and you can find that in the description below.